It was really nice to see you yesterday.
Yeah.
Pops had a great day.
Did she?
Yeah.
What did you do in the afternoon?
We just went out on the boat. She had her one friend. I said she could bring one friend. She brought twins. So 2 friends. We just went over to Starfish and had a barbecue on the beach. It was lovely.
Oh, that's
Very
nice.
just wholesome, nice, fun.
You guys are wholesome, honestly.
Little clap here, just for syncing the sound.
Georgina Lockstab.
Michael Joseph.
Liberty Wealth founder and an all-around just wonderful person. You're an Oxford grad, and there are some other notes here. Oxford grad, you're an investment manager and a financial planner. But what I find is most wonderful about what you do is you're in the relationship business, and I can really relate to that. We both follow a similar ethos in the secure tomorrow today, thinking about the long-term mindset and shifting people from this here and now, instant gratification and living in now, but trying to help our respective clients think longer term and what ifs and the inevitables as well. But before I get to talking about that any further, you are also godmother to my daughter, and I am godfather to your daughter. So this is like a family event. This is great. No, it's important to mention these things because again, I absolutely trust and respect your business and your guidance and advice enough to actually bring you into my family.
We've known each other for a while, Mike.
We have. How long have you been in Cayman?
Almost 17 years now.
17 years. And I met you soon after you came to Cayman as well. I remember it was at that bar in the 7 Mile Shops. I can't remember the name of it now.
Oh, yes, I do remember that night. Yeah.
Yeah, and there was Big Al, and he was there. And your Al, of course.
That was a really long time ago.
That was a long time ago. Bonnie.
Yep.
Bonnie
no
and
children
Lizzie.
back then between us.
Okay, so here we go. We're going to dig in a little bit here, and we're going to talk about, honestly, what is a fee-only fiduciary firm?
Oh, it's a terrible phrase, isn't it?
You took the words out of my mouth.
So, to understand, this is actually really important in the world of financial advice to understand this, and very few people do. And we had to take a step back and understand a bit about how advisors get paid. Advisors and managers get paid, first of all. And there's a few different ways that you as a client can pay someone who's giving you any kind of financial advice.
Right.
The first is that person is selling some kind of a product to you and they get paid a commission. So that would be a commission advisor. Some advisors might mix a commission with a fee. So they may charge you a fee whilst also selling a product that pays them a commission. And the third type of advisor is what we call the fee-only advisor, which is what we at Liberty Wealth are. We don't sell anything to anybody, but we charge a fixed fee or a fee that is very transparent to our clients for what it is that we do. And the reason that we do that is because if you're sitting down with someone who's giving you financial advice or managing your money and they're getting paid by somebody else, and you're not really aware of that because it's not disclosed to you. And sadly, it doesn't have to be disclosed to you in Cayman.
Your incentives are
not aligned. And I saw this happen, and it can be really, really bad. It can be okay if you as a client understand that and you know exactly what that person's getting paid and what it is that they're selling you. But if you don't understand that and it's all smoke and mirrors, it's a massive conflict of interest between the two of you. And the next step in this is understanding what the law says. So there's how the advisor gets paid, and then there's what the law says. So it's a really, really shockingly low bar because the law says,
Okay.
The law
You're going to get complicated on me there.
The law says in Cayman and in most other countries, actually, the US, pretty much in the UK, Australia, various other places, that an advisor has to recommend something that is suitable to the client. Suitable. So if we're the advisors and we have a whole host of things that we can sell you, products that we can sell you, as long as we could say this is suitable for the client, it doesn't have to be in the client's best interest. The law does not say that.
It's terrible.
Which is absolutely terrible. And I thought, this isn't right. You have to be able to sit in front of an advisor and know that that advisor is giving you advice that is in your best interest. And that's the fiduciary bit. You can only be a fiduciary, really, if you've taken out all those conflicts of interest and you're giving your clients the absolute best knowledge that they can have and confidence that the advice that you're giving them is not in your best interest, it's in their best interest. But unfortunately, the law doesn't say that an advisor has to do that.
We're singing from the same hymn sheet. I've said this in other podcasts before, and it really does come through in a lot of everything that we're trying to do and are doing, is that it's client above commission. It's what's best for that client. We need to exhaust their options. We need to build that relationship, that rapport, because we are in the relationship as you are. And even if that advice and education and information that you're providing them ends up with them having the confidence to say, you know what, I don't need your services, or I'm not going to buy property now, or thank you very much anyway, that's okay too.
Because
in
that's built the relationship.
And at some point in time,
that will come back.
call it karma, or it'll come back in some way, shape, or form.
It will.
When they are ready.
Yep.
And or the
they'll
word
say,
of mouth.
To their friends and family, you know what? They were great. They actually told me exactly the right thing. And although I didn't end up becoming a client, I know that what they said was in my best interests.
Yeah. It's really interesting. The traditional approach to sales is so old school. It's dinosaur. It's just done. Not that I don't like dinosaurs, but you know what I mean. It's just this. You've got to think forward.
Yeah. So that's the fee only is how we get paid, and the fiduciary is putting the client at the center of everything that we do. And it, as I say, it's a really misunderstood. It's just not understood because people don't know the questions that they should ask an advisor. But how are you getting paid is the most important one. And we can say to people, we are only getting paid from the fees that you pay us.
Transparent,
and here is
neutral.
exactly what you pay us.
Yep.
And there's nothing that comes to us from anybody else.
That's great. And that, again, establishes the relationship and that client's level of trust and comfort with you, again, which is long-term, right? It's the long-term approach. So what is your day-to-day? What do you think is your the crux of it all? I mean, I know there's trust and there's wills, and we've spoken about this at length before, passwords, utility account numbers. I mean, what's
the crux of it all? It's really about helping people use their money to give them the best life possible. Because the thing that we always acknowledge is that money is not the goal in itself. We've never had anybody, and if we did, they would not end up being our client. If we ever had anyone come into our office and said, the only thing that matters to me is that I die leaving more money than I've ever had in my life, and I beat the S&P 500 index every single year for the last 30 years, like that's the only thing that matters to me.
Yeah.
No one ever says that. What they come in and say is that they want to create more time in their life, more time with their children, more time to read or to study or to travel. And they want to work a bit less. They want to learn to paint, all these things that they want to do. And so our job is figuring out who they are and what's important to them, and then saying, this is how you can use your money in the way that's going to give you the best life possible.
The education that you provided me many years ago now, you asked me a question. I think you may know where I'm going with this. You said, why is money important to you?
Yeah.
Was that the actual question you asked me?
Yeah, it's the question
and I
ask
answered
everyone.
the question, and you said, why?
Why is that important?
And then I went, and then you said, why? And then I answered again, and you said, why? And we just went on probably
It's like the
10,
Simon
12
Sinek.
times.
Do you follow Simon Sinek? Ask.
No.
He's the why guy.
Is he the why guy? Okay.
Yeah.
But it was really interesting. But by the very end, it's shone a really bright spotlight on why money was important to me. And of course, everybody's different. And for me, and I'm happy to share this, was that being able to provide for my family, that security. And I imagine there's an element of that with everybody's importance and need for earning, providing for your family, protecting your family. But it was a really interesting exercise. But it took 10 or 12 answers before I actually got to understand why money was important to me. And I really enjoyed that exercise. And it went to show that you're helping the individual client understand what the actual ultimate core value is in this process.
Do you know what I love about what I do so much is when people come in for the first time, and of course what they're expecting is, us to kind of say, look, we're so great, we can get this performance for you, and here's our amazing portfolios and all this stuff.
Wrong, isn't it?
And they come in, and what we really want to do is find out about who they are and what's important to them. So we ask lots of questions about them. We'll get on to talking about their money, but we don't start.
It's almost the byproduct.
We don't start with their money. It's especially if it's a couple, and we get into some way below that first level, right? And maybe not deep, but like we're getting there. Yeah. And one of them will say something to the other person, and they'll say, I've never said this before, I've never shared this before. And they'll say something. And like that moment when
it's quite powerful.
It's so powerful when something comes out. And I guess that goes to the trust bit, is creating that environment where people feel that they can share things. And that is what I really, really
It's really interesting.
love about my
and
job.
I've experienced that myself as well. And sometimes it goes the wrong way. I don't, and it goes from like, okay,
Yeah.
but at least you're helping them understand whether or not this is the right or the wrong approach.
Yeah.
No, it's brilliant. I love it. And I think, again, relationships, rapport, trust, confidence, information, helping them make a decision with confidence.
It's like a coach, really.
It really is.
Yeah. In many ways.
Counsel.
Yeah. In many ways, we always say to our clients, like, once we get you invested in the right way, that's going to give you the best chance of doing what it is you want to do with your life, which, by the way, for most people is owning bits of businesses, is owning what we call equities, stocks, shares.
Yep.
But remembering what those are, they're not casino chips. It's owning a bit of all of the best businesses on the planet. You're a business owner of one business. You want to be a business owner of all of the best businesses on the planet as your diversification. A little bit of everything. You can buy a bit of all of these businesses in a really simple, cheap, efficient way. Where was I going, Mike?
It's okay. No, because they're going to edit this.
Businesses. So once you own all of those, that was right. It was a coaching bit. Once they own a bit of all those businesses, our job really becomes a behavioural coach. It's to keep them doing the things that they need to do, staying the course, because investing is so temperamental. And you can sit on our sofa and say, yeah, I'm never going to be that person that panics. I'm never going to be that person that plows all of my money into the hot thing. I'm never going to get pulled into Bitcoin at $60,000 or, which it was a couple of years ago, or panic when the market's down 50%, which, by the way, it's fallen 50% 3 times in the last 50 years. You can say that, but it's a bit like saying that you won't be impacted, or soldiers, before a soldier goes to fight a war, thinking that they've done all the training, everything's going to be fine, and you can't understand how you're going to feel until you're on that battlefield and you're being shot at. And that's the analogy with the markets, is that you can think that it's going to be okay, even though we're going to tell you that it's not going to be okay because it's going to go like this. But it's when you're in it, our role is to be the behavioural coach and make sure that people never do the wrong thing at the wrong time for the wrong reason.
No knee-jerk reactions.
Never the knee-jerk reactions, And it's so ingrained into us evolutionarily to do those knee-jerk reactions, because our brain is actually really only wired for one thing. It's to survive. It's to make it to the end of the day. Right? That's all your brain cares about, is keeping you alive, and maybe reproducing as well, but keeping you alive. And we've got these 2 little almond-shaped structures at the base of our neck, which is our amygdala. Right. And if someone ran in here and threw a snake in your lap, it's your amygdala that would cause you to jump up and flee. It's the fight or flight reflex.
I'll throw it on you.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. Fight or flight reflex. And fascinating stuff they've done with hooking people's brains up to MRIs when they're in a simulated trading environment. So either actually trading real money, their real money, or simulating. So they're not actually playing with real money, but they think they are.
Right.
And these bits of your brain go absolutely wild, like wild. Like they flare up as if you're fighting a war. So your brain thinks in those moments when the market's going down and you're, remember, only temporarily losing money if you're diversified and you've done nothing to blow yourself up, you haven't used leverage or done anything silly.
And you haven't overextended yourself.
Right, it can only be temporary because the market always turns around and comes back up again. It's never gone down. It's never gone down and stayed down.
Right.
So you're only temporarily losing money, but your brain thinks that you're dying. It literally thinks you're getting eaten by the lion on the plains of Africa, because that's where our brains evolved. And that's what it's trying to save you from. And we had this conversation with someone the other day and explaining to them that not only is your brain only wired for survival, it's also wired for action. Your brain wants to act, because when we were on the plains of Africa, if there was a rustle in the undergrowth,
what's that?
Right, what is that? If you were the man or woman that stood there and ran fast away from that, even if it wasn't a lion, you were okay.
Yeah.
The person who stood there and didn't run, right, probably 9 times out of 10 it wasn't a lion, it was just something else rummaging around in the undergrowth.
Beetle.
But the time it was a lion, right, the person who didn't act is the one who got eaten. And we are only evolved from the people who did run. We're not evolved from the people that stood there and thought about it and said, maybe it's a lion, but it's probably not a lion. The chances are it's not a lion. I'm just going to stay sitting here. They got eaten. So we are evolved from the people who acted.
Yeah.
And we want to be the ones who are calm. We never react.
Relax.
We never react to what's going on in the markets. We just continue to act on a plan. Act on a plan. Never react to the markets. And that's the behavioral coaching side of what we do. It's much harder than it sounds.
Do you know what? It's actually also very basic. It's very simple.
Yeah. Oh, simple, not easy.
Not easy. Yeah. Exactly.
Just like health and fitness. We have so many great analogies with health and fitness because...
And it's a great analogy.
Yeah, because the rules of being healthy and fit are so simple.
Consistency.
Go to the gym regularly. It doesn't really matter what you do. Just move. Right? Ideally, add a bit of strength stuff in there, but just move. Eat wholesome, good, not processed food. We all know that. Maybe don't drink too much. And they're the rules. Yet, if knowing the rules were enough, then the world would just be full of fit, healthy, skinny, rich people. And we know the world's not. So there's this gap between the knowing and the doing. And that's the gap that a proper financial advisor should be filling, that gap between knowing and doing.
I'm a huge believer in using the professional in their respective fields. And there's a lot of people that can claim that they understand that approach, or, oh, no, I can do it myself. I'm going to save myself the money and do it myself. But you'll ultimately end up coming across challenges, obstacles, and paying twice, right? In that, you think you're being clever, but perhaps it's always the best money spent is using a professional in that field.
I think, and there's a guy called Morgan Housel who's he wrote the book, The Psychology of Money, which is the best book I've ever read on money.
You gave
and
that
he
book to me.
Talks a lot. And he reckons there's like 5% of people in the world that have the temperament to do it themselves, and they can do it themselves.
That can do it themselves, and they will not react, and they'll be able to stay the course on their own devices. 95% of people... Impossible.
Yeah.
They're going to react.
But at some point, and remember, you only have to do it once.
And then it's all over.
It's all over. If you've got this beautifully diversified portfolio that we created or someone else created, or you created for yourself, and it's the perfect portfolio. There is no such thing. But let's say there was this thing called the perfect portfolio and you owned it and you held it for 20 years and you got these amazing returns. Then we hit the financial crisis or, the .com bust or one of these 50% cut and huts. And right around the bottom, which is when the most people pull their money out, we know that, we see the flows, you were the person that pulled. It didn't matter. It didn't matter what happened over that 20, 30 years. You destroyed your plan because then what happens is you have to get back in. And getting back in is so, so hard because you wait and you wait and you wait and you think it's going to keep going lower and it doesn't. It turns around and comes back up. And then you say, well, I can't get back in now because it's higher than it was when I got out. So I'm going to wait for the next crash. And then the next crash will come, of course, but the market will have had a really big recovery before the next crash comes. And then the next crash comes and you think, well, that's going to go a bit lower, so I'll wait. And then you play psychological warfare with yourself.
I use a similar analogy in real estate. It's a long-term asset. And I know that it's a really interesting conversation that you and I have is this balance between the investment portfolio versus a real estate portfolio, right? And I'm happy to get into it with you right here, Georgie.
Let's do it, Mike.
I also believe in balance. The problem that I recognize for a lot of your clients is, and generally many people, is their largest investment is their property, which, and I agree, does not make sense. From a long-term perspective, you can't just have all of your eggs in one basket. And I mean all of your eggs and nothing else anywhere else. But there should always be a balance. Bricks and mortar, a lot of people tend to flock to bricks and mortar at certain stages of market fluctuations, when they're anticipating a downturn in the economy, for example. I'm sure, well, perhaps share with me, what do you think of the trends in that respect? And what percentage would you say is the average person's portfolio in property?
It's a good question. I mean, people love bricks and mortar.
Yeah.
Because again, it goes back to the human, like the need for
physical,
safety. It feels safe,
shelter.
Right? It feels safe. You can touch it, you can feel it. There's the wall, like it's there. You can go visit it, or you live in it. People love it, and the balance is so, so important because property is part of a financial plan. It should be, and everybody at some point is probably going to want a home, and they're going to want to own a home. Although I really think there's nothing wrong with renting at all, but most people want to own a home. They want to own a home, and they should own a home because the memories that you create. I mean, I look at our home, which you've been to so many times, Mike, and the memories you create as a family in a home, you can't. I mean, they're priceless. Those memories.
So the reason I just got all excited there is that renting, absolutely, I agree, will serve a purpose for a period of time. But if you just rent for the long term, then you're just paying off somebody else's mortgage and building somebody else's equity, and you're not protecting your future portfolio or wealth.
That, to a degree, that is true. I would agree.
Did you feel like you had to say yes? It's true.
I think renting works when people want freedom and flexibility.
Sure, if you've got a short period of time, you are literally in the Cayman Islands for a short period of time, perhaps that does make sense. Because the whole stamp duty exposure
you've got
and
to be
everything.
mindful of your transaction costs.
If you're here for 7 years, great.
Yeah, which is why you say it's a long-term investment.
Long-term
because the
asset.
transaction costs are high, and you know, people have done really well flipping properties in Cayman recently because we've been on this trajectory. And we don't know if that's going to continue or not. Probably it's unlikely to continue in the same way.
There's ebbs and flows in the markets. There'll be down times and there'll be up times. But over the course of time, long term, there's always an incline in that value.
Yeah, property prices go up over time, absolutely.
Absolutely. Sometimes it's only 1%. Sometimes it goes down 5%. Sometimes it goes up 10%. Or 30, 40% in recent times. But gradually over time as a long-term asset. But I just thought I would zoom in on that for a moment, the whole renting. And I agree with you, yes. If it's for a short period of time for a specific purpose, then sure. But if you're planning on staying in a particular place for any length of time, I think property is a big move.
As long as you don't overstretch yourself.
I quite agree with you. Again, going back to that sound, solid, stable advice and guidance is never overextend yourself. Don't live above your means.
So the thing we talk about a lot is building a margin of safety into your financial life.
Love it.
Because we don't know what's going to happen next, ever. I just wrote a blog post about this, about understanding uncertainty.
Your blog posts are fantastic.
Because people think that the world seems more uncertain now than it did before, but the world's always uncertain. Like, we never know. We never know what's going to happen next. It's not like we know.
There's always something's going to happen next.
Always, but we don't know what that thing is. And we don't know what the thing is in the world. You know, we didn't know right before 2 planes hit the Twin Towers that was going to be the thing. We had no idea, even in January of 2020, that a global pandemic was going to be the thing. We don't know what the thing's going to be. But there's going to be something. And it might be something globally, it might be something Cayman related, or it might be something in your own life. You might get sick. Someone around you might get sick. You might lose your job. You know, people do lose their jobs, even people in really stable jobs. So because we don't know what's going to happen next, we have to build in a margin of safety.
And that is... And sorry to interrupt, diversifying your portfolio. So it doesn't matter if this happens over here, you're protected over there.
Keeping cash, always. I mean, the one thing I'd say to people around buying a property is never wipe out all your cash to buy the property. And I think people do that quite often. They save, they get the deposit, buy the property, and then they're back down to zero. And that's quite dangerous because when you buy a property, you've suddenly got a whole bunch of expenses that can come your way.
Yeah, and if that inevitable something happens and you don't know what it is or when it happens and you've got a low cash exposure.
The hurricane comes 2 months later. I mean,
so by cash, you don't mean bags of cash under your mattress. You're talking about like on a fixed deposit in a bank.
So right now, ideally, I mean, a year ago, it was just cash because there was no yield, no interest rate to be paid on cash. Now there is, but so... the Cayman banks have not increased their rates on savings accounts. Savings accounts are still pretty much at, I think they're not even at 1%. And mortgage rates are 8 or 8.5, maybe 9 or 9.5 if you're paying prime plus a couple of percent.
But isn't that part of the process? Is it meant to increase?
But there are things you can do to get a bit of yield. But when I say cash, I actually do mean cash in the bank because you can have your liquid investments, which is amazing. And the benefit that has is that they're liquid and you can get at them. They always should be liquid, i.e. if you need them, you can get them in a couple of days. But what we never want to do is, this is the ebb and flow of the market, is we don't know when it's going to go down. I can't say to anyone that we're not going to fall 20 or 30% in the next 3 to 6 months. That absolutely could happen. And what you don't want to happen is you're down 30% on your portfolio, you lose your job, the hurricane hits, the roof falls in, whatever the thing is,
and the pandemic at the same time,
child gets sick, and you're forced to pull money out of your portfolio when we're down here. Because that creates all sorts of psychological stuff. You feel like you lost money, you blame the market, you may even blame your advisor.
But you've also lost all of that momentum and effort for the previous decade.
Exactly. So keeping cash that's not subject to the volatility of the markets, because cash doesn't really give you a return for the reason that it's not volatile.
But it gives you security.
But it gives you the safety and security that if something happens, that you've got it. So when you buy the house, don't buy it until you've got your deposit and you've got still, ideally, a minimum of 3 months of living expenses as a side pot.
My darling wife is an accountant, as you well know, and I'm the one that does the spreadsheet, our cash flow spreadsheet, and I've got 4 or 5 years always ahead, month by month, just to make sure that if there is an unknown or something happens, like when I bought my boat, gosh, I've gone through many boats over the years, but probably 10, 12 years ago, I knew that I wasn't going to buy that boat until I had enough money to buy it twice.
Yeah.
I wanted to make sure that I could actually afford it.
Yeah.
Because sure enough, boats are like a hole in the ground.
That's
right?
a really good one, Mike. I like that.
You just pour money into a boat.
Yeah.
But it meant that it was okay. I could actually afford this boat. And I did. I needed to change out the engines after a few years, and the maintenance, and the guys that come around and help make sure it keeps...
And boats are really expensive, but houses have costs to run as well. If you want to maintain the value of your house, you have to maintain the house, and that costs money.
And that means painting it every now and then, and cleaning out the gutters, and redoing the garden,
and the AC
deck around the
breaks,
pool,
and this,
updating the pool pump, turning it from chlorine to saline.
Yeah, it goes on and on with houses.
Yes, and that's probably part of your issue, is the carrying costs of that investment.
And that is something people don't take into account. So again, going back to not overextending yourself or overstretching yourself, is before buying the property, people must look at their cash flow, get really, really clear on their cash flow, build in their mortgage and extra, given that interest rates might go up further.
Miscellaneous line item, absolutely.
Interest rates going up further. If a year ago I was saying to people, like, this is your mortgage payment now, but you have to be prepared for that. That might double if interest rate goes up. I don't think interest rates are going to double from here, of course, because we're already pretty much at the top. But build in a buffer around your mortgage payments. And then you've got to build in a buffer around, obviously, all the other house expenses, your insurance, your pool, if you've got a standalone home, and your garden, all of those, your strata, if you're in a strata, all of those expenses, plus your CUC and, your most expensive CUC month. And then also build in a contingency around the maintenance. And property experts say that it should be between 1% to 3% of the property value per year.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm a property expert. I like to think myself.
Is that what you say? 1 to 3%?
Absolutely.
So
factor in. Actually, I do 5% because I'm in a constant state of panic.
Yeah.
I like to call it constant state of preparedness. But,
and it may be closer to 5% in Cayman, because the 1 to 3 is not generally in tropical environments where your
higher
appliances wear quicker, the salt, you've got hurricanes and storms. They say between 3 and 4% if you're in that kind of environment.
And what that does, that helps you sleep well at night.
Yep.
And the advisor telling you to factor that in, because it means that, okay, if there wasn't a hurricane and you don't need to change out the fridge or the barbecue or the pool pump, then okay, great. You've actually ended up saving that money. And it's all about saving for the long term. You may not know what you'll end up needing it for, but one day you want to wake up, again, secure tomorrow today.
But it's a big figure, 3%. If you've got $1 million home, that's $30,000 a year on top of everything else.
But don't buy that $1 million home unless you can factor in that 3 to 5%.
Yep, agreed.
Again, it's easy to say this and preaching to everybody that but it is that's the level of solid guidance and guidance and focus that we go to in our advising. Okay, so we've done some great top tips and advice there. Property ladder, affordability, housing issues in pretty much most of the globe at the moment. But let's just stay with Cayman here. We've started Property Cayman Cares, which is designed to help people get onto the property ladder. We're using 2% of every single sale that we make. The commission that our team members make goes into this Property Cayman Cares Foundation that is designed to facilitate this issue. What's your thoughts and/or ideas and guidance on helping people get onto the property ladder?
Gosh, it's really hard in Cayman, isn't it? I mean, most people come to us already on the property ladder because our general clients are high-earning, busy professional families who've got sort of big life dreams and need somebody to help them with the higher, bigger decisions. So we're not generally helping people kind of save for a first property in general.
But are you helping them save for something, even though they may not necessarily know what it is.
Yeah, the most common thing now is school fees, college fees, university fees for people who say that it's really important that if their child turned around and said they want to go to Harvard or one of the top US universities,
or
it
Oxford.
might cost. But the cost there is, if you're a
actually,
Caymanian, it's going to be affordable for most of our clients because it's not actually going to be that much more expensive than a Cayman school.
Really.
But it's the big US.
course.
It's the big US universities that are the wildly expensive ones. You could be paying $200,000 a year for that kind of a university, an Ivy League.
Secure tomorrow today. Make decisions today that you're going to thank your younger self. Thank goodness that I invested accordingly in,
But going back to that, what I would say to someone, and we do lots of education stuff and speaking to a lot of people about this, is it all goes back to cash flow, really getting to grips with your cash flow. Because if you're saving for a house, ideally you want to set a goal and say, in 5 years, I want to buy or have this much available to buy a house. This is the deposit I want. And then to work back from that and say what that means on a yearly basis, what that means on a monthly basis, and then start in a really disciplined fashion. Shifting the money from one account to another and hopefully somewhere where you can't touch it. So for young Caymanians, for example, a lot of them can use a credit union account, which is great for that because it's a little bit...
High interest rates.
They get higher interest rates and it's a little bit less accessible than keeping it in their debit checking account.
Yep.
Move it there every month. Ideally have it done as an automation so you don't even have to do anything and just automate your financial life and know that at the end of the year you're going to have X amount and then at the end of 2 years you're going to have Y and it's going to build.
It was criminal in the pandemic when government authorized people to take up to 25% of their pension out. And that's not criminal in itself. And it was designed to help people in their time of need. The problem is that the lion's share of those people bought a spoiler for their car, a brand new motorbike, or they used the money to go on holiday. They went on Amazon and bought a whole new wardrobe. And these are all short-term satisfaction type things, which sure is nice, but very short-sighted because a pension is a long-term investment. I took out my money, but I invested it. I invested it into a piece of property because that's what I know, and I was thinking long term. In fact, we need to talk about that. The splendid isolation, Georgie.
Oh yes.
You haven't responded to my email, but I felt that there should. It was a bit of a knee-jerk reaction. It was the right decision, I feel, but there should have been some parameters around it.
Yeah.
Because to almost help people understand that don't sacrifice this long-term investment because in 3, 5, 7, 15, 20 years time when you retire.
And the Cayman pensions are not sufficient.
It's not sufficient.
As they are. I mean, they're really not sufficient as they are. There's going to be a huge problem in the next few decades, I think. I don't know how people are going to fund retirement in Cayman.
Well, they did in France, didn't they? Didn't they increase the
by 2 years.
By 2 years.
All the 30-year-olds up in arms.
Honestly, guys,
I love French.
Get over it. The French will find any excuse to
That's it. I was speaking to a Frenchman the other day who was saying that. I was like, it's just a French.
But it affects us all because I was flying from London to Barcelona to go and see Alejandro on one of the trips. And the flight was delayed 2 hours because the French air traffic controllers were striking and you can only have a certain number of planes in any one corridor. And that was limited by the number of air traffic controllers. So I was upset with the French.
Because they've got to work 2 more years. Yeah.
Anyway,
in 30 years' time.
Yeah, exactly. Get over it already. That's interesting. So investment properties or second homes. We've touched on it already, but purchasing a non-primary residence for one's portfolio. We tend to differ on this, as we've just discussed. What percentage of your portfolio should be in property, whether it's your non-primary residence as like a rental investment? Where does that fall? And it changes from party to party.
So if you're a business owner, a really nice way to think about it would be a third, a third, a third. So a third is your own business, which is amazing because you have a lot of control over your own business.
Right.
But exogenous external factors can impact that. So you want to be diversified. Another third in other people's businesses, which is the global stock market.
Equities,
Apples and the Facebooks and the Teslas and all these amazing businesses. Tesla is an
I was
amazing
going to say,
business
but not Tesla right now.
run by a madman. But
But you say that in the nicest way.
Yes, of course.
Yes.
A bit of all of the most profitable, enduring, successful businesses on the planet. Amazing. Like when you actually think that you can just go out and own that.
Everybody else is doing the hard work, and you just have a slice of...
Everybody else is doing the hard work. It's amazing. It's the most powerful wealth creation.
And it doesn't matter,
tool.
as long as you've got a slice of it. I mean, it's all relative, of course. The more you put in, the more you've got of it. But as long as you have a bit of it.
Yep.
And then the third is...
You're giving your money to the best CEOs and managers on the planet. And the third would be your property. And if you're not a business owner, then maybe it's, to try and aim for a half and a half. So
50-50.
half in over time. And most people don't come to us there because most people... busy, successful professionals in their 40, high-earning professionals, still, their major asset is their home, and they might well have paid their home off at that point, actually. So they're coming to us at a state where they've paid off their mortgage because they didn't really know what else to do, so they focused on that, which is amazing. It's an amazing thing to do, to pay off your mortgage.
Reduce your debt.
Incredible. And now they're kind of building up cash, and they're like, we don't really know what our next thing is that we should be doing.
What percentage of your clients, and I suppose this is a little bit of a silly question because most of your clients are high earning and well established before they even come to you. But what percentage of them come along and they're not sharing that third concept, and they actually have 75% of their investments in property? Do you advise them, and it's okay, don't worry, you can say yes, advise them to sort of liquidate some of those and balance it out a little bit better? I mean, is there a high percentage that have
Sometimes, if they come and they've got a lot of properties and there's no real plan around it and it's causing them stress, because that's the other thing with managing properties is you've got your home and a second property, and we always say to people, if you own a second property and it's a lifestyle decision and you can afford it and you're going to use it, maybe it's a ski chalet, maybe it's the house in England because your kids are at school there, maybe it's a place in little Cayman, whatever that thing is, if you can afford it and that's going to enhance your lifestyle, go ahead and buy it. We would never say to someone that doesn't make sense.
And that's what it is, by the way, a lifestyle
there we go.
investment.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And that is an investment in your life.
Absolutely.
But if someone's kind of just haphazardly bought a lot of properties because they didn't really know what else to do, and now they've got 6 rental properties and it's causing them stress because they have to manage them, and especially if they're not
tenants
in Cayman,
and washing machines and
right, they've got somewhere in the UK and they're trying to manage it, and it's a big headache.
You use a property manager to, but it's still a cost. It's still a running cost attached to that
investment. And it causes mental stress. Then we might say slowly over time.
And I'm good with
that.
I'm good with that because I absolutely adhere to the do not overextend yourself and sleep well at night and make decisions that you're going to thank your younger self in the years to come for having made those decisions. No, it's good.
And it's the same if people leave. We've got a lot of people leaving Cayman right now, actually, Mike. Generally going back to the UK, interestingly, and asking, should they keep their property here or sell it? And again, a lot of that comes down to, do you have the time to manage a property in Cayman while you're living in the UK? And how are you going to feel going through hurricane season every year? It's quite stressful for people.
Well, it is, absolutely. And I would probably comment on that by saying it depends. Every single family, person, individual, entity has a slightly different situation. So they're going to vary tremendously. But overall, it's about making sure that you're not over leveraged, that it's not causing you stress, that there's safety nets and buffers around you. So the worst case scenario, there is a hurricane and or rental rates drop and or if the roof caves in, that you've got the insurance.
So that might be something if someone came to us with a whole bunch of rental properties and they've overextended themselves on them.
Let's liquidate a couple of them to create a buffer around the others.
Exactly. Pay off some debt. You may even be able to get a few mortgage free that then you're going to start getting a rental yield from. Amazing.
Exactly.
That's great.
We call it the property journey. Everybody's at a different stage and different level and different speed and rate and of their property journey. And so we actually really dig down deep. And you said it at the very beginning of this conversation, you get to learn about the person, their priorities, their wants, their needs. So you can help guide them, or at least give them the confidence or the information and education to make a decision with confidence, right?
That's it.
Okay, retirement planning, and this is, I touched on this at the very beginning when I said trusts and wills and passwords. Georgie, This is
Don't get me started on passwords, Mike.
okay. Do not put your passwords in your contact lists under passwords, and then you got a whole long list. That's silly. That's fine. I want to talk more about spouses not sharing or understanding, because sadly, the inevitable is that people will lose their better half at some point in time. But the other half was the one that paid all the bills, and you don't know where necessarily what the passwords are to different accounts, or I didn't know that we had that investment. And
this is such a critical
this is important.
topic. Yeah. And what we find with couples, particularly high earning professional couples where they're both working, is one person tends to take the lead on the finances.
Yep.
And also, actually, if you've got only one spouse working, often the other person might take the lead on all of the household bills. And, traditionally, this would be the wife. Not always, because it's not always, but in a traditional family, he's working, she's at home with the kids, doing all of that stuff. And she's probably paying all the bills and doing all the supermarket shopping. And she probably has quite a good idea of actually the expenses. But he still might be managing the higher level investment kind of stuff. And when both couples are working, generally one person just takes that role, because when you're so engrossed in life, you divvy up the
absolutely
the roles. And so one thing we do really try to do is always have both couples involved, or
at least access to that information should there be any.
Yeah, and ideally they're coming along to the meetings and
together.
Yeah. If that person, and we have this conversation all the time, what would happen? And this is a hard thing to say to people. What would happen if
the very fact you're asking that question,
you drop down dead tomorrow, or you? Let's talk about life insurance, because generally people in Cayman are really underinsured for their lives. What they've done before they come and see us is they've got insurance that's covered their mortgage, their original mortgage amount, because they had to take that out when they bought their house. So let's say they had $1 million mortgage, they probably got $1 million life insurance policy. And that mortgage may still or may not be there anymore.
Yep.
But if they still have a mortgage in place, that life insurance policy is going to pay off that mortgage. Great. The other spouse, let's say the other spouse is the non-earner, is left debt-free. But let's say that spouse hasn't worked for the last 10 or 15 years because he or she has been at home raising the children. And the other person was the high earner, earning,
big money.
That income's now gone. That person's dead. The income's gone. So this person's left debt-free, which is amazing, but where is their income coming from? They may have to go back out and get a job, but that's going to be, they've been out of the workforce for 10 or 15 years,
so
right?
Unemployable to an extent.
They're going to go get some job that's going to pay some of the bills, but it's certainly not going to enable them to live the life that they were living before. So we have to have a life insurance policy that's going to fund the income that person's going to need. If they decide they're going to stay in Cayman, if they're an expat, some people say, you know what, I would go, if my spouse died, I would move back home. But a lot of people say, I'd want to be able to stay here. My kids have been born here.
Friends,
this is what they know. I wouldn't want to have
safe.
to uproot them and take them back. So that's one part of it. The other part is exactly what you said. Would that person know how to would they even have access to cash? Because often if someone's earning money, the cash is all in their account. The other person might have some access to that. They may have a credit card that he or she pays off every month. There's plenty of cash there, but it's not in their name and they can't get to it. So that's the first thing. Is there access to cash if that person dies? Is there a joint account?
To any of these accounts?
Yeah. And thirdly, do you know what's what? Can you get into that person's phone? I often say, can you get into each other's phones?
Interesting.
Because if everything's on a phone and you don't know the code, and a lot of couples actually don't know the codes to each other's phones.
Lauren's code's about 6 numbers. I can never remember it.
And
She's
often
got
people
mine.
say, well, the kid can. Like, they know one of the children can. They're like, I don't know, but I know George knows it.
George, come open up Mum's phone.
Yeah. Can you get into each other's phones? Because then there's a lot of stuff in there. But ideally, you'd have a system whereby you had access to all of each other's passwords. And there's amazing technology that does that nowadays.
It's simple.
We use 1Password. There's LastPass.
It's not
There's
amazing
a whole
technology.
bunch of them.
It's simple technology.
It's really simple tech. You're going to pay $3 or $4 a month to be able to have a vault that has a master password, and in that you have access to everything that you've ever logged into. Your social media accounts. Because if someone dies and you don't know how to get into their Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, you can't close those accounts. It's really, really hard. If you know those passwords are in a vault, then you can do that. So having each other's master password
I found it very, very fulfilling being asked difficult, awkward questions when we came to see you a while back now. But suddenly realizing and understanding where I am at my stage in life and things you asked me, you had answers to questions I didn't know I needed to ask. You helped guide and the vault is what triggered that comment. That in this vault, this one-stop shop vault, there's all the information for anybody that, well, my spouse, but and the other thing was a will. Most people don't have wills, do they?
Yes, the wills are such a hard one to do because you've got to really think about dying, and people really, really don't want to think about dying.
And you should also review it and update it. You know, a new child comes into the mix,
or you get married. By the way,
yes, I know.
Because when you get married, you know that your previous will ceases to exist.
Yeah.
That catches people out. But if you get divorced, your will still does exist. So
of course it does.
Yeah. So that's a really interesting one. So when you get divorced, you have to make sure that you redo your will because you might be passing everything to someone you don't want to pass it to. And also when you get married, you have to update it. Will's so important because if you don't have a will that spells out exactly how you're going to take care of the people that are important to you and how your wealth is going to be divided amongst those people, someone else is going to decide that. And who's going to look after your children? Someone else is going to decide that for you. And that's heartbreaking, really, to think about someone else making the decision about where your children go. Your wealth will be divvied up according to this intestate laws in Cayman, which means
It's just a bog standard.
Yeah, people think that it's going to go to their spouse automatically, but it actually doesn't. If you don't have a will, 50% of it will go to your spouse, 50% of your estate, and the other 50% actually gets held in trust for your children, and they get it when they turn 18. So if you're a high or ultra high net worth person, you say you've got a $10 million net worth.
Ooh.
Your spouse will get 5. The other 5 is going to be held for your children. Let's say you have 2 children and they're, 10 years old. That money is going to sit there and they're going to get it when they turn 18. And most people go, of course I don't want my children getting $3 million when they turn 18. Nobody wants that for their child. It's going to be a disaster.
Get a will.
So you have to have a will that spells out, and you don't have to have a trust.
No.
For some people they need a trust, but trusts have to be, you have to think really carefully about a trust because you give up ownership of your assets when you put them into a trust. And that can create other issues that people don't think about.
Well, I'll tell you one right now. The Cayman Islands government will not recognize the value of the property in your permanent residency application if it's in a trust because it's not your money.
It's not your money. You don't own it anymore. Yeah, that's a really big one.
Yeah.
And you also really want to make sure that you're not domiciled in the UK anymore when you put things into a trust. And proving that you're not domiciled in the UK is very hard because that domicile issue is very grey, if you know anything about that. So there are lots of reasons, but you can have within your will that your children are going to get distributions at certain ages. So, you might have something at 18, we have something at 21, we have something at 25, and then
Absolutely.
the bulk of it comes much later in life, when they're in their 30s.
And you give guidance around that as well.
Totally, because people haven't thought about that. And, the lawyers are amazing at writing the will, but they will write the will based on what you tell them you want. And if you haven't had someone help you think really hard about how you want that estate plan to look, then the will's not going to reflect that. So wills is really, really important. And as you say, it's not a one and done. It's we've done it for now, and we're going to keep revisiting it every couple of years and make sure the things and the people that we've written in our will, we still want to be in there.
If they're still in your life.
If they might not be, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Quick question. I could talk to you for hours, Georgie. I love this stuff. Is downsizing always a smart move?
Later in life. I'm yet to see somebody who's hit their late 50s, 60s or 70s and has downsized and has regretted it. Generally what we've seen is people feel a great sense of relief. Yeah, and they come in and they say, I feel so much lighter. They've got less stuff. But, there's a mental burden with things.
Yeah, I've got a lot of stuff.
They've got less stuff. They've got less space. They've got more money because they've downsized it and more freedom. And I've yet to see someone who says, we wish we'd kept that
But does that
house.
mean that you don't overextend and get that massive, oversized something and just have to sell it in 5, 7, 10 years' time? Can't you just sort of stay in that normal size home and, again,
and then stay in it.
Stay in it. Yeah. You've already downsized. Yeah. You're living within the parameters. Again, every journey is slightly different.
Yeah.
Georgie, will you downsize when the kids go off to college?
That's a great question, Mike. Well, you know our home. Our home is beautiful, but
such a
it's
lovely,
not. We
wholesome
don't live in
family.
we don't live in a mansion. We live in a fairly
real.
ordinary sized Cayman home. So I don't know the answer to that.
Well, that's relative.
I love the thought of having a home that they can come back to with their friends and for
Well, a couple of your kids told me yesterday that they wanted to build a new home.
Right.
And another one of the third said, no, I like this home. So you've got to
Interesting,
factor in
isn't
their
it?
decisions as well.
Do we?
Okay, just to sign off, I've got 3, 4, 5 rapid fire questions here. All right, to put you on the spot. The first one is easy. Local shout out. Is there a particular company, individual, business that sort of captured your attention you feel deserves a shout out?
Do you know who deserves a shout out?
Who?
Guy. My amazing colleague,
awesome.
Guy, because he just passed his third and
He did
final
pass it, did he?
CFA exam, which is really tough. It's a really,
That's
really
not
tough
easy
exam.
stuff.
And he did it whilst having quite a demanding job and a newborn baby. And he still found the time to do. He thinks he did north of 350 hours of study in the last 4 months on top of a job and a baby. So
He's
a superstar.
always a positive attitude
amazing.
and friendly.
Am I allowed to shout out him?
Yes, of course you are, because he's an absolute legend. Second is a little bit controversial. All right. I have to ask, where is the best place to live in Cayman and why?
I really love our neighbourhood.
Everyone's going to say the same thing. Where I live.
How long have we got on this?
Go for it.
So where you live is one of the most important decisions you can make around building wealth in your life. Because going back to the lion, we're also evolved to keep up.
Yep.
Because you actually didn't really have to outrun
Keeping up with the Josephs. That's what I call it.
you don't have to outrun the lion. You just have to outrun your buddy.
Yep.
Right. So we never want to be at the back of the pack. And one thing that there's been loads of research on is the pervasiveness of trying to keep up the Joneses if you live in a really high-end neighborhood. Because what happens is you drive home and they've just bought a new fancy car and they've just upgraded all their driveway and blah, blah, blah. And that becomes your new baseline and you're always trying to keep up. So we love our house. We're on the beautiful, quiet canal, as you know.
We touched on this
But we're
yesterday.
not in a high-end neighborhood. We're in a very normal neighborhood. And when I drive home, I don't see fancy stuff. I just don't see it. So it doesn't come in. It doesn't come into
which
our
is a good thing.
psyche. And that's amazing. And I think that is what I love.
Nor are the kids exposed to it either.
And that's what I love about where we live. So we live in the Prospect area on the canals. It's beautifully quiet. We adore it.
Yeah, I love that answer. That's really good. You tied that all in beautifully, Georgie. I like it. Third is a little bit controversial as well. The best place for sundowners on the island.
Oh, that's easy. It's Tilly's.
Tilly's.
Hands down,
It's such a great
My favourite
location.
place to go have a drink on
Do you know
Friday.
what? They are full of energy, those people.
they're
Everyone-
great.
it's
It's
a
just so
phenomenal
beautiful.
venue.
Yeah.
7 Mile Beach.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a good one. I like that. I thought you were going to say you're home with the kids.
Oh, that too. Out on the boat.
Out on the boats. There you go. 4 is a little bit deep.
Okay.
Are you ready? Brace for impact. What do you love most about Cayman? Be sincere and authentic and
Most
real
about
about
Cayman.
it. What do you love most about Cayman?
That's really easy too. It's people. It's the family. It's the fact that when we met you guys and we met all of our friends become family so quick. And I think if we ever opted to leave this island, it would be leaving our friends would be so hard to do.
But you're not going to.
But we're not going to.
Okay, so I just want to check, make sure.
But that would be the thing. I mean, the weather is amazing, obviously, and the beaches and the ease of life. But it's our friendships. And we
The
were
family
so
and
lucky when we came to this island that we met people like you who had been here all your life and were really invested in this island. We had a really established group of friends from the start, and that's made our Cayman life so happy.
Yeah. And you're very welcome members of the community and dear friends. And an incredible professional. I love your ethos, your approach, your guidance, your professionalism, your knowledge, your intelligence, and you play the piano. And the saxophone. You're awesome. Mother to 3 and a brilliant wife and businesswoman extraordinaire. Thank you
Thanks
very
for
much,
having me,
Georgie.
Mike.
I really appreciate it. You're wonderful. Thank you.
Ditto.